Why are things not the way I expect them to be? It's so rude. I've done so much for my fellow man. I stopped eating all those slavery-produced products. I started commuting using as few fossil fuels as I possibly could. I even stopped being needlessly aggressive to people who disagree with my Letterboxd reviews on weekdays. Frankly, I am due, karmically, cosmically, astrologically at this point, for a life of pure, simple, unchallenged. One where I don't have to try and form an opinion on those Wicked films because, you know what? I'm just not going to watch them. Why should I continue to learn and unlearn and relearn how things work, how I feel about any given thing, when a far easier alternative would just be to ignore anything that doesn't fit my head's mold on what a good thing is? This attitude will lead you into the somnolent bliss of an extremely biased mind. And the great thing about being there is that once you are, you can actually watch those Wicked films now if you want to, because you already know the opinion you've got on them. 2.5. So why? Why do I want to live the life of this opaque boulder? Why do I not want to change from my stubborn opinion? Because if I follow my directive for what I know I'm going to like, then I know who I am. Because then you don't need to ask me what I think, because you already know it by even being casually acquainted with me. Conversation avoided. Because I like being unchallenged. Because I like that it doesn't matter what I think. I've always liked it. I've always liked being so small. Okay, fine. Challenge me then. Okay guys, here's the deal. I like speed, but I never liked a certain kind of speed that begins with E and ends with Y. That of course being electrifying virtual rally. Rally is a kind of racing that essentially involves very politely asking your car to travel in the direction you want it to travel in, and then crossing your fingers and hoping that it doesn't misinterpret your simple desire for connection and synergy as an attack on the very fibre of its being and then completely crash out. Metaphorically, obviously. In part because of this, rally car games always held this confusing allure for me, simultaneously seeming too obtuse to wrap my head around, and yet graspable in a way that a screenshot of EVE Online or an Excel spreadsheet just isn't. You can see how every little piece of this engine works, and after every crash, you might not know exactly what you did wrong, but you at least know that you shouldn't have crashed, which is going to add a tiny little marker to the embarrassingly large data set, which is the total amount of times you would have shut that guy in the seat up next to you. Permanently. I never knew how to line up those points though. The investigation never materialized into instinct, and so I guess I kind of just convinced myself that this entire subgenre was a word that my 14-year-old self would use to describe things he didn't like, that began with G and ended with Y. That of course being goofy. You are wrong, is what was said to me on a cold and lonely Wednesday evening, when I had the chance to play a game called Art of Rally. Art of Rally is the guy with the boombox stood outside your bedroom window. It's the rigid exercise routine that starts on January 1st. It's Vincent Gallo in Buffalo 66. It's the game that promises to do better. Unfortunately, as with most people who say that they're just going to suddenly magically be better, what is much more likely to happen is an incredible period of exactly what they say, followed by the exact same shit as before, except now you have even more reason to hate yourself. Otherwise known as January 2nd. Art of Rally essentially follows this trajectory. You start with a beautiful new perspective on the rally racing genre. The camera is way further back, which eliminates the need for helpful direction, nagging coming from the passenger seat. Each area has as much nostalgic bliss as all the days before that were better than this one, and the art style drips with this cartoonish abstraction that annoyingly makes it feel less invigorating to mow through crowds of people. This isn't a sports game, you tell yourself. It's an indie game. An indie game doesn't disrespect me like a no-nonsense functional simulation of mechanical matter. It values my time and money, and is thankful to me for being humble enough to patronize a small team of independent creators. An indie game is just appreciative that I'm even there. It's quite hard to feel that appreciation while you're wrapped around a tree. And so comes the reason for this. Art of Rally was this stained promise of a game. It seemed to give me the feeling that I should have a feeling while playing, but all I could squeeze out was a kind of numb content. I began wrapping myself around trees just to feel something. But then, And it didn't take too long. Every long-headed mismanagement of the vehicle that resulted in a horrific accident started to feel differently. These moments of self-effacing stupidity, these short bursts of venom on the altar of mundanity, began to piece something new together somewhere unreachable in my head. When you play a game whose entire gameplay loop revolves around how bad you are at it, it forces you to reconsider why you came to it in the first place, why I even came to this game in the first place, especially considering that all other rally car games have so far left me feeling bitter and sullen. Well, it turns out that the difference between something that you're making yourself play for unknown reasons and something that you actually want to play is, like, basically nothing. After a million crashes, after 1,000 pledges to be better and 100 bloody re-evaluations of that promise, and after you realize how unbudging the game is going to be to meet you where you are, it becomes so obvious that the adaptation needs to happen the other way around. So the only thing stopping you from doing the thing you have objectively been trying to do for so many hours on this game, and for a lot more on its predecessors, is your attitude towards that thing. This is how Art of Rally gaslit me into liking rally car games. What had I been doing this whole time if I wasn't enjoying myself? What had I missed about what I was feeling this whole time to not identify all that locked-in, mechanically cathartic, for better or worse, time as fun? What even is fun anyway? Numbers and colours and buttons and wheels. Wrapping you around a tree. Rally car games have always been fun, and like something that begins with P and ends in N, stopping the fun early, in the pre-fun, is really the only way to cheat yourself. Premature ejaculation. Repetitive strain injuries used to be really shit, but at least they were a great excuse to get out of things until Boomerang X showed up in my life, which is one of those arched back type of FPSs where every second has you riled up, every enemy takes a little extra something to get rid of, and every piece of movement tech requires you to do some kind of bizarre gang signage on the keyboard to pull off. I only played it for a couple of hours, but even that time alone was enough to mangle every tendon in my wrist so far past the point of no return that it actually did show up again just behind me now. Anyways, I went back. A few days later, I played it again, and in going back, I knew the terror that awaited my nerve endings, but if I'm being honest, the anticipation of being riled up, of figuring out exactly what little extra something every enemy needed, and of being in the one situation where it's actually okay for someone like me to be throwing up gang signs superseded the fear of the RSI, and so, yeah, I went back. And I fucked up my wrist again, and I went back again, and in doing this over and over, it actually gave me a new relationship to both the game and the crushingly persistent RSI, because when the boomerang meets the X, when every click of the mouse and every scuffed up dodge to the side sends a warm tingle of displeasure down your arm, when it kills you a little bit extra to come back to something, but you keep going back to it, whether you like it or not, it kind of means that you dig it. I like getting an RSI now. Shows I believed in something. Valley Peaks is the kind of game championed by the freaks of the world. First-person, platformer, video game. Nothing else. To demonstrate the severity of this aspect for potential enjoyment of the game, please do me a favour and remember any time that you or someone you know has said, "Oh, I really like this platform/climbing segment in the popular FPS I'm currently playing. I wish there was a whole game based on this." Oh wait, that hasn't happened to you? Interesting. This game is very not figuratively an uphill battle. The whole concept revolves around scrambling your way up increasingly unkind rock faces using the kind of navigational wits that would be catastrophic to any wannabe skydivers, and using every ounce of strength you have in your, I hope, tongue. It is as addictive as it is confounding that it is addictive, because looking at it fills me with an emotion somewhere between annoyance and boredom. All you can see so much of the time boils down to basically a sequence of circles getting bigger until they fill your entire screen thanks to this rigid, fixed perspective. What you see as evidence right there is only a little piece of all the stuff you need to keep on top of the dome. While you're fumbling up close and personal with what looks like a vague suggestion of an object, you still need to know where the next one is, where the ground is, where the trail leading to you snakes back to in case you need to recover. Your brain is going to be so full from this internal 3D map that .objs are going to be coming out your ears, and so this in turn makes me wonder, why? For God's sake, why? Look at Jusant, at Uncharted, at fucking real life. An awareness of the topology of the climbing wall around you is maybe the most important part of climbing in the first place. Without having an idea of everything else outside of the exact hole you're reaching on, you are surrendering to the whims of the wall, not learning it, but reacting to it. And in the case of this valley's peaks, there were so many instances where this limitation wasted my time, frustrated me, sent me into spirals of stupid despondency to the point where I very easily could have committed several of the 7 deadly sins on the developers of the game. Not the ones you'd hope either. It just seems so obvious to me. Never has first-person platforming ever accomplished anything aside from put money in the pockets of the companies who manufacture anti-migraine medication. And so, for this game to focus so stubbornly on that very thing, to not give a shit that it's actually kind of really hard to play, and to keep pushing you up these slopes with an urgency that feels entirely at odds with its art style and thematic mode, I couldn't help but feel like my time was going to the same pointless graveyard as all of that spent scrolling reels and talking to Juan. But there was something missing, as evidenced by the fact that I couldn't stop playing. I have no problem just quitting a game if it's not giving me the morsels I want to keep playing, but Valley Peaks had me in this hold that I just couldn't explain. It perturbed me. It pissed me the f off. So why did I find it so impossible to put it down? I remember being a kid and sitting in the back of the car one day. I don't recall anything about that day, or really much of anything before I was like 15, thank you drugs. But I do remember that we were going to this track and field event that I was woefully unequipped for, being of a certain respiratorially fibrotic persuasion that at the time rendered all of my running, jumping, and acrobatic abilities far below that of all the other kids. And so I was scared, and I was weak and hurt. Hurt me to be in the back of that car, but not actually because I was just worried about my inevitable embarrassment. Much more succinctly, I just felt this anger at the whole situation. It pissed me off knowing that every turn of the wheel and every milestone flying by my little fragment of the world was another second that I would spend like this, wasting time, being sad. Now, of course, at the time, I didn't have many words for this apart from screw this, but that's just because I wasn't working with the full picture. We all have the tiniest slice of what's really going on. We all only have the perspective of this moment at this second, and so all of this context, this other stuff that's so important, can just get swept under the rug. Now, am I saying that this memory is what made me magically turn around and start liking this bizarre niche subgenre of control scheme found in games like Valley Peaks? No. But when I find myself frustrated at the narrow scope of where my tongue meets the rock, while surrounded by a smaller world, a simpler one than the one my supposedly adult body is sitting in right now, I can't help but find some quiescent piece of myself come back to me. Anger at what you couldn't see, at what you couldn't understand, carrying yourself forward with I don't even know what energy you have left, and not even stopping once to question whether or not it's worth it. I liked having that back for a while, if only in a video game. Feeling bad can feel pretty good sometimes. I don't really like football games. To be honest, I don't even really like football, but there is this one game on the PSP called World Tour Soccer that absolutely ripped my head off because, unlike in any other football games, this one lets you slide tackle the goalkeeper while he has the ball safe in his hands. You would obviously immediately get sent off with a red card and then control will be handed back to the other team, now with a not so insignificant advantage. And I also have no doubt that this was definitely just an oversight in development, with the rest of the game looking like it has the same amount of budget as your average Village Fate, but it is so cool that they let you be so stupid. So, I don't know. I'm like a football guy now. And just like a football guy, I can't wait to just enjoy a sport that I like with people that I like to be around. Oh shit, I left all my stereotypes in 2004. That's all I can take. 8 seconds.
Recipes, Mike. Computer, make sure.
ADHD is the most comfortable prison there is. It's a lead-lined blanket of egoistic safety, a self-whirring, catatonic humming of relentless thought. Also, a really good reason to stop with all the pros and tell it you like it is. It can really stink. Now, granted, I don't actually know if I officially have it or not. I've never had the will to get around to actually booking a doctor's appointment, go figure. But just like with the line of what is art and what is porn, I think when you know, you know. Although I do find myself often sticking around for a while, just to be sure. And so the way that all this manifests in my physical actions is in this really alienating, tangled web of intention, where I want so desperately to be able to engage with the things I want to engage with, to read actual books, to be able to dedicate time to these huge masterpieces that I know for a fact I will not only enjoy, but will also enrich my understanding of other people, will make me a better writer, will connect me with the ideas shared and therefore with the people who share them, and will generally bring me closer into being this future tense, all-round good guy that I psychically masturbate at the thought of. But it feels like the road that this intention has to take to get into reality is littered with dozens of road works, diverting it endlessly around the metropolitan of my mind until it ends up lost, confused, and eroded in some scummy backwater, watching in a jealous rage as I end up scrolling IG Reels for the 40th time that day. This sucks. I clearly hate the effort it takes to quieten the noise down enough to be able to engage in some great piece of art I'm sleeping on, but the more I hate it, the less I identify with any of my actions. I'm not me when I'm scrolling. These aren't my hands. This isn't my world. The simple act of letting my natural will dictate what I do has led me into the unreality of the worn-thin synapse, into a different world, a much more abnormal one, an unusual world, an odd planet, a strange land. Strange land. Strange land. Strangeland is a point-and-click adventure game that takes place in some nebulous anti-space masquerading as a long-dead carnival. The kind of place where dilapidated paths suspend themselves in thin air and birds wax lyrically about life with far more articulation than any human around. The kind of place you would only wish to visit if chasing after women barely clothed by hospital gowns sounds like a good idea to you. Please don't answer that. Logically speaking, Strangeland sticks to the rules of our world with the adherence of a 5-year-old Pritt-stick, instead choosing to build its own insane set of farcical laws that only stay intact just long enough to be broken. It's a kind of liquid logic that I know is super common in this genre of game, but here, because we are stuck in a world fundamentally so askew, it feels like the game is relishing in this fact, trolling you, telling you one minute that this rabid dog in your path is simply just hungry for some food, but then killing you anyway after you go through all sorts of effort to provide it. This feels antithetical to a good time, right? To have a game world where the only mode of interaction you have with it is in solving these logical puzzles, but the logic between these puzzles is inconsistent, forcing you to genuinely at times just throw everything you can think of at the wall and start trying to turn coins into claws or combining ropes with branches that you just cut them free from, is to basically tell me to fuck off, right? I beg to differ. Please. Please can I differ? In fact, what is so fun about this game, and one of the reasons why it's really the only one I've spoken about today that I can give a true, hearty recommendation for, is that as you keep plowing through these almost completely nonsensically written scenarios and smashing your woodpecker beak into the most frustratingly obtuse dialogue trees, not only do you find yourself heavily relating to the plight of the main character, who's just as PO'd as you, but also you start to find yourself thinking in the same language that the game does, a strange and deeply foreign language of logic that brings things together to make a new kind of sense in this insane land where nothing did before. It has this bizarre difficulty curve where at first things are utterly incomprehensible and the connections between each step of a puzzle seem hilariously tenuous. Like, what do you mean throwing a rock at a specific part of a bird makes it squawk out the name of that body part, which is then heard by a nearby scholar, which is then transcribed into his notes, which you can then take to a furnace several rooms away, which you can then ask it to turn it into a weapon, which it does. That's your only freebie, by the way. But then, by the latter half of the game, this kind of thing becomes unquestionable, natural even, and this is when you realize you have been radicalized. I think you end up spending so much energy questioning the logic of these earlier puzzles, trying to decipher on what level this game is operating, that you don't actually have that much left over to solve them. So, in order to start making actual proper progress, by far the most important step you have to take is to stop this questioning, to just accept the nonsensicality that's being asked of you and debase yourself to the level of this strange land. To get through, you quite literally have to forget about the real world, about your brand of logic, about the rules you've been following since you were small enough to have to be careful to not bump your head on the dinner table, about the distractions lining up in your inbox and the gleaming rectangle of color lying so grabbably close to you, about the noise, about the drama, about everything that you do that makes you feel like shit. Strangeland is a game of many themes. Connection, longing, tormented starfish and flotation tanks, you know, the usual stuff. But most prevalent of all is that of mistrust. Not only can you not trust the things that the game's puzzles or any of the people involved are telling you, and not only does the overall plot lead you into a rabbit hole of falsehoods, turns out barely clothed women in hospital gowns are not what they're cracked up to be, but goddamn if this game doesn't make you doubt yourself. And as powerful as an impulse as that is to inspire within me, with all the solution crisscrossing and confidence destroying murking happening at every turn, I've got to be honest, I don't need any more of that in my life. Self-doubt. That is where the handcuffs materialize out of thin air. The pain of your limitation becomes palpable the second you acknowledge it, precisely because the heart fights it, burying you in a pit of hatred and resentment directed inwards so deep that you're gonna end up finding Ryan Reynolds down there. Just giving the worst line delivery ever. And it can really arrest you. That fucking heavy blanket labeled "you're not good enough" stops you from doing so many of the things that you once thought to be so easy. You can't read that book. You can't really fit in with those people. You can't solve that Strangeland puzzle. You know this gameplay is being recorded, right? You know you look like such a fool doing the same thing you did a minute ago with no changes, thinking it's gonna have a different result. You think you're gonna make it? You think the thing you're chasing at the top of this carnival is gonna fill that hole hiding in your chest? You think anything good is gonna come of this obsession, this toxic persistent? Do you even know yourself? Do you even know who you are, what you're capable of? Do you? Do you? Do you? There's a thing. Less of a character, more like a ghost-like presence that appears throughout Strangeland. This dark, spiky mass, clearly acting as the counterpart to our human part, constantly crops up and basically lays all of our shortcomings out in front of us with a harshness that no real person would ever say, yielding criticism beyond even that of overbearing parents and hostile drunks, with a directness that, when we hear this same voice in our heads, we can often misread as perspicacious, as getting right to the point and understanding us in a way we so fear to be understood. At first, this voice is caged. It's actually the initial goal that you're working towards for the first good portion of the game. And so, with it locked up, while getting through the first sections is leaving you confused, vulnerable, frustrated, it almost feels like you need this negative voice abhorring you after every dumb decision you make to motivate you to keep going. It feels like you need unkindness to crystallize all of your unfocus and anxiety into something that's, for once, usable. And then, even as it destroys everything else that is really useful in your life and actively sabotages the methods to find your goals, as it puts up roadwork after roadwork that divert you into every nook and cranny of this awful place, and as it taunts you, persistently forcing you to listen to how irrevocably shit you are, you still, when it comes down to it, believe everything that it tells you. When, in the tail end of the game, you come face to face with the most naked form of this presence, the unabashedly honest copy of yourself that it's been mimicking this entire time, you still can't run away from it. Can't let it go. Addicted to the unkindness, you let it back into your private-most presence over and over, letting it consume you, starting again, letting it erode and degrade your spirit, and because of this persistence of rot exploded in die-pack fashion through every aspect of this game, with this dark presence and the opacity of the puzzles and the self-doubt it necessitates to be able to engage with it all, Strangeland manages to pinpointedly highlight the most beautiful logical fallacy of our time. I can't stay focused, really. I can't turn this endlessly whirring meat machine off for any substantial amount of time, which can so easily turn into the subsequent alienation of not being able to do the things you want to do, to forego the books and the Disco Elysiums and the serious not-for-babies side of this medium that I've enjoyed since I was one, in favour of an infinite scroll and that sad, hopeless entropy that is the rejection of change. But to hate yourself for that is by far the best way to ensure that that's going to be how you feel forever. Listening so intently to that voice that is completely honest about wanting what's worst for you is how you end up not feeling yourself. How you stop identifying with the actions that your ADHD and anxieties make it really hard not to take. So try to revel in the noise, in the difference between out there and in here, in the bizarre translation that occurs between. It might actually make the difficult things a bit easier to do. Ah, 9 seconds. New record. Turns out video games have actually gaslit me into liking a lot of things. Rally, RSI, first-person platforming, football, and most incredulously of all, myself. I love that this is a medium capable of doing that, of being able to lift you out of the ruts disguised as self-content and show you perspectives distinct from your own disgustingly narrow one, if you let it. And this is one of the only times I will ever impart straight-spoken, non-ironic advice on how I think you should live your life. Please let it. To close yourself off to the world, to say that this is all I need, and to not be available to experience something you at first would bat your beady little eyes at, is just another way of lying to yourself. This sculpture of clay we think inside of is never done, never will be. So pick that chisel back up and keep defining the shape that it's going to take. Be kind to yourself. Please. Allow yourself to change. You never know what insane opinions you're going to end up with.